In today's episode of Locked On Oilers, the Oilers lose the second of a home and home and the first of a back-to-back. What went wrong and what can the Oilers build on heading into Nashville on Tuesday? We will talk about that and much more in today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Oilers podcast. I'm your host and former Oilers game day producer, Brett Holden. As mentioned on today's episode, we're going to go through that tough 2-1 loss for the Edmonton Oilers against the Minnesota Wild, as it was a sleeper, but it was a sleeper for a reason. We will talk about that in just a second, but also on today's episode, we're going to go through the three things that the Edmonton Oilers needed to do in the home and home that we etched out from Friday's episode to have any sort of success in this mini series with the Wild. We will go through what the Oilers did well and what the Edmonton Oilers didn't do well in those two games, which actually may have accumulated to the two results. Also, to wrap up today's episode, we will go through the good, the bad, and the ugly as we do after every game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. Alrighty, let's get into the difficult 2-1 loss for the Oilers as the Oilers go up against a Minnesota Wild team who, after playing in Edmonton, had to fly to Vancouver and play the Vancouver Canucks on Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday and then fly back to Minnesota. Now, the Edmonton Oilers, after their win against the Wild, 5-2 win on Friday, they got to stay home. They had a nice day on Saturday, then flew out on Sunday, and then played on Monday. A lot of travel heading into this game for the two teams, and yes, it was 3 days, 2 days really, for the Edmonton Oilers off between the last Minnesota Wild game and this one, and then the Minnesota Wild having to have that back-to-back, only having 1 day, probably traveling into that day, finally playing against the Oilers on Monday. That's not easy on either team. And you kind of see the outcome of that. A snoozer, a 2-1 game between the Oilers and the Wild. No goals for Connor McDavid or Leon Draisaitl. No goals for Kirill Kaprizov. Matthew Boldy does get a goal. Matt Zuccarello getting an assist as well in the game. But really, this was an absolute snoozer. The Edmonton Oilers do get a goal from Zach Hyman. He gets his first goal in 10 games. Let's be real. He scored a couple in between then. All of those goals that he did score, though, in that time frame did end up getting called back, and this one almost did, as Hyman's goal did go to review for quote-unquote goalie interference. It wasn't goalie interference. The goal was good. The Oilers got another power play off of it, but they couldn't convert. And that was the issue, is the Edmonton Oilers just couldn't figure out anything, I guess, almost in the game. The Edmonton Oilers only firing 6 shots towards Fleury in the second period, 6 shots in the third period, 12 total shots through 40 minutes towards Marc-Andre Fleury, and a season low in shots for at 21. That's not good enough. That's not going to beat anybody. That's not going to beat probably the Arizona Coyotes, and that's not good if you're not playing the Arizona Coyotes every game. And now the Edmonton Oilers go up in the second half of a home-to-home, the first half of a back-to-back, not to mention that they also play Nashville tomorrow on Tuesday. Not good. Now, here's some other stats the Minnesota Wild outplayed the Oilers in, and I think really tells the story of the game. Hits 15-11 for the Wild, a stat that quietly the Oilers tend to not dominate, but tend to come out on the upper half in. Didn't do so in this one. Did get kind of, even though it was only 15 hits, did get kind of battered in this one and just never really got anything going. The Wild were the first to many pucks, outbodied and outmanned and out-physicaled the Edmonton Oilers, and it showed that on the scoreboard. The shots, again, 30. If you're getting 30 shots on goal, you're having a good game, and that's what the Minnesota Wild had. 30 shots on the Edmonton Oilers, 21. And Stuart Skinner had a good game. 28 saves on 30 shots, 23 saves on 24 that were fired against him. Another very solid game. That's wasted away by a poor offensive performance by the Edmonton Oilers. Then you can also tell why, as 13 of the Edmonton Oilers shots towards the Wild net were blocked. 13 blocks for the Minnesota Wild, 7 for the Edmonton Oilers. That's not exactly a recipe to win. Now, the Edmonton Oilers fall to 16-13-0 on the year. Not the best record. Nice that they're up by three games on that 500, but I will say that this is the Edmonton Oilers just need to learn from this. This is a tough game, a flat game from the Edmonton Oilers. I'm sure that would be probably the word that Jay Woodcroft would use for this game. It was a flat game for the Edmonton Oilers. Could never really get anything going in the offensive zone. But the positive in this is, yes, there is a positive. The Oilers only allowed 2 goals in a loss. The Oilers lost 2-1 in a loss. That is good. That is something to build on, and lost 2-1 against a team who's very good offensively. I'll take that any day. Now, the issue again, as mentioned, the Oilers are now in the first half of a back-to-back. More travel for the Edmonton Oilers as they head to Nashville. Could be a difficult game, but the Edmonton Oilers heading into Nashville need to have energy. They need to build off this game. This can be a sleeper. You're fine with one game being a sleeper, but it's a matter of coming out the next one. This road trip can't become another, 4 games of sleeper after sleeper after sleeper. Jack Campbell will probably get the net, most likely get the net in case of anything crazy happening against the Nashville Predators, excuse me. Let's have a decent game in front of them. Let's have the same game that the Edmonton Oilers had in front of Stuart Skinner in this one against the Nashville Predators. Either way, the Edmonton Oilers are back in action tomorrow night, as mentioned. 6 o'clock puck drop. I don't know why I can't say o'clock. 6 o'clock puck drop in Nashville for that one as the Oilers face the Predators. Again in this season, as the last one, the Oilers won pretty handily. Either way, let's move on to the 3 things that the Edmonton Oilers needed to do in this home and home against the Minnesota Wild. In one game, they did it. In the second one, not so much. We will talk about that in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Simply Safe. At Locked On Oilers, we believe home should be where you and your family feel the safest, especially over the holidays. This season, give yourself and your family the gift of peace and protection with the #1 rated home security system, Simply Safe. And right now, Simply Safe is offering Locked On Oilers listeners 40% off of a new security system. But don't put this off. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify if a threat is real. And you can get higher police priority response. And with 24/7 professional monitoring service, it costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of a traditional home security systems. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, stay in complete control of your system. Arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your camera, or just adjust the system settings anytime, anywhere, all with the top-rated Simply Safe app. Don't miss your chance to save big on my favorite security system. Get 40% off any new system at simplysafe.com/lockedonnhl. That is simplysafe.com/lockedonnhl. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Alrighty. Thank you so much for making Locked On Oilers your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, not right now, but after in your second listen, make sure you tune in to Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. Alrighty, on Friday, we broke down three things. We had three keys for the Edmonton Oilers heading into this home and home against the Minnesota Wild that they would have had to do to have any sort of success against the Minnesota Wild. And in one game, well, spoiler alert, they did all three things. Now, in the second game, not so much. So, we are going to go through all three of those keys, go through the games, and let you know whether or not the Edmonton Oilers did those things. The first thing that the Edmonton Oilers needed to do in this series to have any sort of success between the two games is score first. Well, the Edmonton Oilers did that on Friday against the Minnesota Wild as Derek Ryan scored a fourth line goal for the Edmonton Oilers as well. Their first shift of the game, get out there, score a goal. Derek Ryan from Devonshore and Clean Costin got the crowd going, got the Oilers going, and kept the momentum rolling for the Edmonton Oilers. Now, in the game tonight against the Minnesota Wild, not so much, as Matthew Boldy scored the first goal on the power play for the Minnesota Wild as Kirill Kaprizov and Mats Zuccarello gets the secondary assist in that one. The Edmonton Oilers went on to win the first game, and they went on to lose the second as the Minnesota Wild improved to 10-2-2 on the season when scoring the first goal. Maybe the first goal is important. Now on to the second key for the Edmonton Oilers in this home and home against the Minnesota Wild, and that was keep the pedal to the metal. The Edmonton Oilers in the first game, I gave them a hesitant check mark in this one as they were up 2-0 on Friday, ended up blowing the lead 2-2 until the Edmonton Oilers scored 3 unanswered goals. So I would say the Oilers put the pedal to the metal after they blew the lead and ended up allowing Minnesota back in the game. However, the reason why they were able to blow the roof open in this game was because they were able to score the first goal. They were also able to score the second goal as they were up 2-0 in the game. That little bit of leniency allows the Oilers to go and allow that 2-1 goal, to go and allow that 2-2 goal, just as long as you go and score that next one. And then they did. And then they scored the one after. And then they scored the one after that. So the Edmonton Oilers in the first game on Friday against the Minnesota Wild were able to put the pedal to the metal when they needed to. They scored the first goal, scored the second goal, put the Wild on their heels. Yes, they gave a little bit of a kickback and allowed the Wild to get back into the game, but they were able to get that third goal, the fourth goal, and the fifth goal, and it led on to a win for the Edmonton Oilers. However, in this one against the Minnesota Wild, not so much. They allow the Wild to score the first goal. Then they come back only a minute and I believe 18 seconds later, it may have been a minute and a half later, and they tie the game. But that was all the Oilers were able to do, as the Minnesota Wild were able to come back in the second period, score the second goal, and that was all they needed. The Edmonton Oilers were flat from there on. Yes, they were able to get back into the game and got some pretty decent chances down the stretch, but only fired 6 shots in the second period, 6 shots in the third period. If you're trying to win a hockey game, 6 shots down the stretch is not going to do it. 12 shots in 40 minutes is not going to do it. When you fire 9 shots in the first period and the rest of the game only have a surplus of 3 more shots over 40 minutes, that's an issue. You're not winning any games, and in zero definition of the term are you putting the pedal to the metal. So in game 2, the Edmonton Oilers only scored 1 goal, only fired 12 shots in 40 minutes, and only had a season low 21 shots of Marc-Andre Fleury. Far from putting the pedal to the metal, and guess what? The Oilers lost that one. Now, the third and final thing that we wrote down for the Edmonton Oilers that they needed to do in this home and home against the Minnesota Wild, and that is get 2 goals, at least 2 goals, from anyone other than Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Well, in game 1, the Edmonton Oilers did that. In game 2, they didn't. In game 1, the Edmonton Oilers got goals from Derek Ryan, Kyler Yamamoto on his first goal of the year, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And then in this one, the only goal of the game, Zach Hyman for the Edmonton Oilers. Connor and Leon didn't even get on the goal sheet in this one. Yeah, that's not going to spell a victory in very many games, especially in games where you're coming out flat, where all 4 lines couldn't really generate much, including Leon and Connor. I'm going to include Leon and Connor in that one. Now it's a matter of how you respond. But in every game since basically the middle of October that the Edmonton Oilers have won, they've had goals from at least 2 goal scorers not named Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. And that tradition, I guess, continued on Friday when they beat the Minnesota Wild. Derek Ryan, Kyler Yamamoto, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins score. They win 5-2. In this one, Zach Hyman, the only goal scorer, and the Oilers lose. Support. That's all it takes to win. Now, the Oilers need to keep doing this. Obviously, these aren't necessarily 3 things that are just accustomed to the Minnesota Wild, and if you do this against the Wild, you'll win games. This is what the Edmonton Oilers need to do, not only against the Minnesota Wild, not only against the Nashville Predators, but against the Montreal Canadiens, against the Calgary Flames, against the Seattle Kraken, against the Vegas Golden Knights. In every game that they go on to play for the rest of the season, these need to be the 3 things that the Oilers do to make sure they win hockey games. So again, to go back through them, the first thing was score first. In game 1 on Friday, they were able to do so, and they went on to win from a Derek Ryan goal on their first shift. And in game 2, not so much. Matthew Boldy scored the first goal on the power play. Zach Hyman was able to score immediately after, but only after Minnesota scored the first goal. The second thing the Edmonton Oilers need to do to have any sort of success down the stretch is keep the pedal to the metal. Maybe not down the stretch, but you know what I'm saying. Keep the pedal to the metal. As mentioned in the first game on Friday, the Oilers were able to do so, gave themselves a 2-goal cushion, did blow it, but did end up winning the game by 3 goals, 5-2, on Friday. In this one on Monday, not so much, only scoring 1 goal in this one. And then the third and final thing the Edmonton Oilers need to do in the rest of the games for the rest of the season, there you go, get at least 2 goals from anybody not named Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. On Friday, they got that from Derek Ryan, Kyler Yamamoto, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. In this one on Monday, they were only able to get a goal from Zach Hyman. They went on to lose that one. Let's wrap up with the good, the bad, and the ugly from this one, as there are some good things to talk about in this game, and there are some bad things that the Oilers can build on from the game against the Minnesota Wild on Monday night. We'll talk about that in just a second, but first, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends from every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football, the college bowl season is right around the corner, basketball, and the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline. Guys, we mentioned the World Cup, Croatia, Argentina, okay, France, Morocco. What were the odds for Morocco making it to the semifinals of the World Cup? Spoiler alert, not very high. Hopefully you followed the juice on that one. Either way, if you love sports podcasts, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get all of your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Alrighty, where we are going to wrap up today, as mentioned, after every Oilers game, the good, the bad, and the ugly from this one against the Minnesota Wild. And we're going to start off positive. The good in this game against the Minnesota Wild is Stuart Skinner. Another fantastic game from Stuart Skinner, stopping 28 of 30, 23 of 24 he faced at even strength. And I do want to give a little honorable mention to the team defense as well. Yes, it's 30 shots on goal towards Stuart Skinner, but still a very solid game for the Oilers, keeping shots relatively to the outside and helping Stuart Skinner as much as they possibly could. So the good in this one, Stuart Skinner / team defense, which will be a very rare thing that we see this season. But once you do see it, you gotta give it the props. Yes, the Oilers lose 2-1, but basically nearly no fault to the Oilers team defense and as well Stuart Skinner. The bad from this one, the lack of intensity. I mentioned that this is a game that both teams are coming off of a travel day. Minnesota played in Edmonton, then Vancouver immediately after. Probably flew out of Vancouver probably that night, if not Sunday morning. The Oilers flew to Minnesota on Sunday. Both landed probably on Sunday. Coming into a game on Monday, I'm sure the Wild will go on a little bit of a home stretch here. The Oilers in the first game of a back-to-back. That's already on a road trip in a week where they play 4 games. It's a lot. So both teams were kind of limping into this one. However, the Minnesota Wild were able to show that intensity just that much more and show their form and their class over the Edmonton Oilers in this one. But the Edmonton Oilers did lack that intensity that is needed from any contending team at any point. The Edmonton Oilers do need that. So they did lack the intensity in this one. I'm going to give it a bad. I did give it a lot of excuses there and reasons why they probably lacked intensity, but either way, they still need to bring it, especially if they want to win against difficult teams like the Minnesota Wild, like a team who's had their number for years and years and years. And the final thing, the ugly in this one, the shot distribution. The Edmonton Oilers having their least amount of shots for in this one, 21 shots against Marc-Andre Fleury, 6 shots in the second period, 6 shots in the third period. The Edmonton Oilers were down since the second period, and the fact that they were only able to muster 12 shots in 40 minutes is not great. So, and also at the same time, you're allowing 30 shots against as well. So if you're not going to be shooting, you better be preventing the puck from going towards your net. And the Edmonton Oilers weren't able to do so. The Oilers lose, and that's probably a good reason why. So the 3 things, the good, the bad, and the ugly from this one between the Edmonton Oilers and the Minnesota Wild. The good, Stuart Skinner, 28 saves on 30 shots, 23 of 24 at even strength. The bad, the lack of intensity, both teams coming off tough travel days and travel schedules. A little bit of a reason there, but the Minnesota Wild proving their intensity just that much more, and they were the team that came out with the W. And the ugly, the shot distribution in this one. A season low on shots for the Edmonton Oilers, 21 against the Minnesota Wild. What was that good old meme? What's meme? The Vine? What's 9 plus 10? 21? Yeah, I'm showing my age there. Either way, the Edmonton Oilers are back in action tomorrow night, Tuesday night, against the Nashville Predators. 6 o'clock puck drop. There you go. I can't say 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock puck drop in Nashville, the city of music. Is that what they're called? Either Music City? I don't know. Let's call it there. Hopefully we will see you then, and hopefully at the end of that one we can play La Bamba, baby.